I'm really here tonight because my parents picked up a hitchhiker based solely on the fact that he was wearing a Stuyvesant High School Department of Physical Education t-shirt. And when they told him that I was a freshman at Stuyvesant, he said, oh, well, she's got to take Frank McCourt's class. So based on the recommendation of a hitchhiker, I found myself as a sophomore in room 205. Most teachers to me look like Diane Arbus portraits. Not this man. He's handsome, graceful, alert. His eyes percolate with molecular activity. So much, in fact, it doesn't seem possible he's really a teacher. He points to a kid in the middle of the middle row. What's your name? Louis? What'd you have for dinner last night, Louis? This is Mr. McCourt's famous first lesson. He goes around the room prodding us. Okay, he says finally, why is it so important to remember what you ate for dinner last night? We sit there dumbly. In order to write, you have to remember your childhood and what it was like to be a child and continue to approach the world with that same enthusiasm. This is 16 years before Angela's Ashes will be published. None of us at this time, least of all Mr. McCourt himself, know how prescient his words are, how he, more than anyone else, will heed them, and how famous he will become. At that moment, he is, as we say, only a teacher. What did you eat for dinner last night? He stood among us privileged, indolent teenagers with our eyeliner and our fancy backpacks as we chewed gum and doodled and watched the clock and rattled off, I don't know, meatloaf. If we had ever been curious enough to ask him what he'd eaten for dinner as a child, we would have heard. Almost nothing, though for Christmas one year we did get a pig's head in a bucket from the St. Vincent de Paul Society. He'd spent his childhood starving, yet he stood there quietly, listening to our answers, as if what we had to say was poetry. Stuyvesant High School is top-notch. Prove the transitive postulate, diagram xylem and phloem. Who was Robespierre? In Mr. McCourt's class, however, we sing bawdy folk songs, craft poetry out of recipes, write courtroom defenses for household objects. Every Friday is open mic where students read aloud anything we've written. For 45 minutes, we aerate our brains with music, poetry, humor. And yes, we read. Mr. McCourt is intensely passionate about the Scarlet Letter. Hester Prynne is a sexual renegade, he announces. Good God, the man gets us excited about the Puritans. I've dreamt about being a writer since I was 8. Under his tutelage, I blossom. I become his acolyte, his huge groupie. I'm too cool to moon around his desk, so instead, I write something every Friday for open mic, hoping to impress him. Since I'm a teenager, even my hair is an opera. The voices in my head are mercilessly, I'm fat, I'm unpopular, nobody likes me, and my home life, of course, is hideous. I spend a lot of time crying in stairwells. One friend gives me Percocet, another Black Beauties. At nightclub, plenty of men give me cocaine. It would be so easy to sink into a well of medication, but instead I focus on Mr. McCourt's class. Oh, Miss Gilman, he says, you've got a gift. I write a series of vignettes about teenagers in New York. Send this to the Village Voice, he urges. And I do, and the week before my 17th birthday, the Village Voice publishes me. He has no idea how he is saving my life, redeeming me from the abyss. When I head off to college, his words in my yearbook are greater than any love poem. Go to your room and let your pen rip across the page. Move over, Jane Austen. Bow your head, Mary McCarthy. Run for cover, Fran Lebowitz. And in the darkest night, when I'm ravaged with insecurity and despair, I reread it, and I write. And we stay in touch. When I'm in the city, we get together for drinks. When I return as a journalist, Mr. McCourt becomes Frank, evolving into my mentor and friend. When I have an op-ed piece in the New York Times or win a journalism award, I call him. He is as proud as any parent. But in my heart, it doesn't seem right. He is the major talent here. He has so much wit and eloquence and gloriousness in him. I can't help but feel that he was meant for better. Then I received an advance copy of Angela's Ashes. As soon as I put it down, I call him. Oh my God, this is so fucking brilliant. I haven't slept for 3 days, I tell him. Oh, I was hoping you'd like it, he says simply. We all know what comes next. The whole world gets to participate in Frank McCourt's happy ending, in his global symphonic success. We get to see what comes after the miserable Irish Catholic childhood, with its shiftless, loquacious, alcoholic father, the pious, defeated mother moaning by the fire. All of us from Stuyvesant get to watch the accolades rain down on him like champagne. We're practically dancing on the phone to each other. He did it. The justice of it is monumental. The day he wins the Pulitzer Prize, I call him again. "Oh yeah, I'm a real big shot now, aren't I?" he teases. "My agent called me this morning. Everyone's calling me this morning. I can't hardly believe it. I keep waiting, for the other shoe to drop." "Oh, Frank," I say, "look at your childhood, Frank. Look at everything you've gone through. This is the other shoe, Frank." I myself become an author. In 2005, when my book debuts on the New York Times bestseller list, the first person I telephone isn't my husband or my agent or my parents. It's Frank. He isn't home, so I leave a message on his machine. "Mr. McCourt, it's Susan Gilman from your class in room 205. And I begin to cry. Moments later, he calls me back. "Is this the New York Times best-selling author, Susan Jane Gilman?" "Oh, Mr. McCourt," I wail. Of course, I haven't called him Mr. McCourt in decades. But for this call, this breathtaking, fantastical call, it's Mr. McCourt I'm paying homage to. The selfless, inspiring teacher, this generous renegade who is ultimately responsible for my becoming a writer, for my living a life of humor and literature instead of drugs or despondency. "Oh, Mr. McCourt, I couldn't have done it without you," I choke. "You made me what I am today." Oh, what cliched lines. Oh, how he would, should, cross them out with a red pen and scribble in the margins, "You can do better." But instead he chuckles. "I did, didn't I?" he teases. "You certainly did," I say.